You're listening to the Faith and Other Oddities podcast, brought to you by the Raven Creek Social Club, where we talk about faith and other oddities. For questions, comments, or to be part of the conversation, join us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, where you can find us at Raven Creek SC. Now for your hosts, Emily Dixon and Nathan Underwood.
So I don't know if we've actually complained about it on the show, but we've been using some really terrible folding chairs to sit and record in, and we had talked about chairs would probably be one of the first things we get if we get enough support. But fortunately,
that's our Patreon plug right there.
Yeah, Patreon. Yeah, but we had a friend who was helping someone move, and they were getting rid of their dining room set because they were moving into like a kind of retirement community, and they were going to take it to Goodwill, and Mickey happened to mention that we needed chairs, so we've got some great chairs. They were free.
Even better.
And so we're thankful for the chairs. I actually recorded an episode of Commentarians the other night with Naomi from the paddle store, and we watched Serenity. So I was in about 2 hours of viewing time, plus there was kind of you have to get everything set for what you're going to be doing during the show. So
well, and
we chatted for about 20-30 minutes before actually starting the movie.
That's what I say. We get such great guests on the Commentarians that when you do a show, you have to talk before and after the show.
Yeah, and there's probably a good 15 minutes of chatting after, because she was a delightful guest to talk with. She was also nerdy like I am, so we had a lot of stuff to talk about, and so that was cool. And then, but yeah, I didn't feel like my body was going to break down after getting out of it. So we're thankful for the chairs.
Definitely.
And
because we would get up and would take us 5 minutes to actually fully stand upright.
yeah. My back would be killing me, and my rear end would hurt. But
you could feel yours.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So anyway, we're thankful for our chairs.
Absolutely.
So we want to let everyone know that we're recording in more humane conditions now than we once were. No one's being injured. So anyway, I'm sure you wanted to know about all that.
I've actually, what I've found has been very interesting is the people who are really into the show kind of like to hear about some of this stuff.
Yeah. So if you've been curious about our recording conditions, they're getting better. So, and also you might notice we have moved. This is mine / Emily's collection of books. Who knows how many actually came from Emily's?
Yeah, that used to be a big deal. Now since I've downsized, it's keep them here, keep them safe.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. They're a little safer here than they are in the camper. So, anyway, but yeah, so but that's that. So okay. So I guess we should talk some Bible.
Yeah. And the hard part about the way we record sometimes is the fact that it's been weeks.
It's been about 3 weeks,
something like that,
since you were able to get up here, because I think we had someone got sick last weekend, didn't they?
Yes.
And
yes.
So
you had a pukey daughter.
Yeah.
So, but more fun stuff about us. So anyway, but that means that I've got to remember, where did we leave off? And I think we left off with Isaac and Rebekah getting married.
Yes.
And
I believe that's right. I haven't edited that episode yet. So if there's anything between where we stopped last time and where we pick up today and you want to know about it, let us know. We'll hit it up in a Q&A episode or something.
We are true professionals.
Yes.
So we're actually picking up today in Genesis 25:19. And this is just going to wrap up a few points about Isaac, because there really isn't a lot about Isaac after we leave the binding and the marriage to Rebekah. There's one more account after that.
Mm-hmm.
But then his story kind of becomes tied up in Jacob and Esau's story.
Right.
For a little bit. But Isaac is kind of passive. He really, not a lot happens because he made it happen.
Right. Well, and he doesn't get into a whole lot of trouble as much as, I mean, he does a little bit, but he only has one wife.
Mm-hmm.
he's
the only patriarch who only has one wife.
Yeah, he starts to head off to Egypt, but then he doesn't. Yeah, I think
He's working the land that God had promised to give them.
yeah, and so it's kind of like I love the New Testament where there's the Bereans, and all you hear about them is in Acts that they were more righteous than the Jews in Thessalonica because they studied the scriptures. And so when you look at Thessalonians, First and Second Thessalonians, those are pretty short books, and so it's like the better you do, it's the less people have to hear about you.
Pretty much, because Isaac is the only one he really doesn't make. He makes one mistake, and I'm just going to go ahead and throw that out here because I don't think we're going to spend much time on when he passes Rebekah off as his sister.
Right.
And so, kind of a little repeat of dad and his tactics there. But that's really the only major mess up that Isaac does. And even then, he doesn't do the same used carsman sales pitch.
Used carsman?
Used
car salesman?
That's it, yeah. Whatever. Okay. I was going to say something witty there, but it's still too early.
Yeah. So, but yeah. So but that is one thing that, like I said, it's fairly truncated, but there are some interesting things with Isaac. So let's go ahead and get on to that.
Really, the only thing I wanted to add is Isaac is referenced in Amos, the book of Amos, and chapter 7, verses 9 and 16. And it talks about the shrines of Isaac and the house of Isaac. And this has led scholars to believe that there might be another book out there somewhere that tells more stories about Isaac and what he did. We don't have that in scripture, obviously, but that's actually going to play into something we're going to get into sometime this weekend. If the Bible didn't preserve something, then one of the things we have to accept on faith is we didn't need it.
Right.
And so we can have interesting little folklore and historical stuff that comes out in various stories. But if it's not included directly in the Bible, then it's not essential for faith and practice.
Right. Well, and even, I mean, you could even make the argument that everything in the Bible is not necessarily essential for faith and practice. And that actually causes a lot of debate with a lot of people. I mean, we want to study the Bible as much as we can and understand it to the best of our ability. I mean, and that ability, of course, varies from person to person. Mm-hmm. But we should always be striving to do our best with that. But at the same time, there's a lot of secondary and tertiary, I guess, issues and beyond, whatever goes after tertiary. I just like that word. But there's a lot of things, after, Christ is Lord, that is debatable. And we can, so that it's kind of at what point is it necessary? And again, how do we frame salvation? But we could get into that and go all day.
Yeah, I don't think I'm prepared for that discussion.
I don't think we have notes for that discussion, but we could have it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But we're talking about Isaac, because he's pretty cool. One of the things that is cool about him, he is the only patriarch that prays for his wife, which coming on the heels of Abraham, who was, his whole battle was trying to get a clue that Sarah was essential to the covenant.
Right.
And then we're going to talk about Jacob. And Jacob, man, you talk about God being able to redeem anyone. Jacob's it.
Okay.
And so we'll talk some of that. But Jacob doesn't pray for his wives. So Isaac really stands out as the one who got it right. And the one thing we do know about him is that working the land was very important to him. And it was very significant that he actually went back. He redug the wells that his father had dug. He called them by the names that Abraham had called them. And so he was really reclaiming the land, and he was very invested in the land, which is probably one of the reasons why when he sees Rebekah, where is she? She's in the fields. And so he sees her as an extension of himself. She's in the fields. Where does he work? In the fields. And so there's this connection immediately with her character and the placement of where she is with his identity as a man. And that's just kind of a little, it's not essential to understanding the story, but I think it adds a little depth in that high level of partnership that they had.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I didn't have anything to add to that.
You needed to say something so I could drink my coffee.
Sorry.
But we're going to pick up. It's Genesis 25:19, and it begins. Why don't you read it? Oh, you're getting a drink now.
Yep. So,
and I'm dropping my notes.
25:19.
25:19. If you'll read it in the ESV, because I have it in the.
I just lost my place. Hold on.
That's what bookmarks are for.
Well, yeah, I remembered I had one after I said that. So, see if I can. Let's see. These are the generations of Isaac, Abraham. Oh, you just want me to say all the names?
No,
I'm kidding.
No, actually, that's
it. Actually doesn't go into a long genealogy there.
Yeah, no, that's actually the verse I wanted, because if you notice, this is we talked about the Toledotes
right.
in a former episode, and the Toledotes, so that's the generations. It's really it's kind of intriguing that there is a Toledote of Isaac. There's a Toledote of Jacob. There's not a Toledote of Abraham.
Okay.
And the reason for that is we have a Toledote of Terah, Abraham's father.
Okay.
And so
is that where they pick up on the idea that Terah was heading to Canaan before Abraham?
Yes. And that, and the fact that by putting it with Terah, we also have the generations that include Rebekah.
Okay.
And so Rebekah is very much a part of the same lineage. And so the women, it's not just that the women were not Canaanites, because I think that's how it's been presented in the Bible. It's like, don't marry the foreigners.
Sure.
They are actually a part of this covenant calling. They're part of the family that was set apart. And so by not having a Toledot of Abraham, we still preserve that position of Rebekah as part of this covenant community.
Okay.
And
that makes sense.
Well, yeah, and the I think we covered it in one of the past episodes. The language used of Rebekah is almost identical to the language used of Abraham.
Right. Yeah, and the blessing.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, I think we did cover that.
So, Rebekah, she all throughout we got the blessing, which is almost an exact replica of Abraham's blessing. But then, whenever she gets pregnant, well, first of all, she realizes she's not having kids.
Right, and then Jacob prays for
Isaac.
Sorry,
Mm-hmm.
I get them all mixed up.
This is why we're doing
people
this.
have names. Yeah. So Isaac, yeah, and Isaac then prays for her that she would have kids. Right,
and God talks to Rebekah. He doesn't talk to Isaac. He talks to Rebekah. And he says in Genesis 25:23, he says, 2 nations are in your womb. 2 separate peoples shall issue from your body. 1 people shall be mightier than the other. The older shall serve the younger.
Right.
And so this is a setup, because I think everybody who's read their Bible knows what comes after this is Jacob and Rebekah manipulating the situation.
Right. Now, I do think it's kind of funny, when we talk about God making this announcement, oftentimes when I hear it taught in Sunday school and other things, it's made as though it was like God stood on the street corner and made this grand proclamation. But it does say that he told Rebekah specifically. And then you pair that with like Mary and Gabriel, how, that was not like some grand,
right,
stand on the street corner, blow a trumpet and all that to declare that Jesus was coming. And so I think we kind of missed that parallel of God speaking one-on-one to the woman involved. And which I guess that's the person you want to talk to about having kids.
Yeah, well, it's helpful if she knows what's going on. And, but I think that's one of the interesting things throughout the Bible is, even in Genesis 3, when Adam and Eve fall, God has the talk with Eve. And everybody says, oh, well, this is the curse of Eve. And, I just encourage everybody, go back and read that section and look where you find the word curse.
Right.
Eve is never cursed. And now there's consequences, but there's not a curse. Matter of fact, the word curse is only applied to 2 things in that passage. And one is the snake, and the other is the ground.
Right.
Adam and Eve themselves are not cursed. And I think that's an interesting distinction that we often overlook. And
right. And there's so many theological implications to that of, there's lots of self-hatred doctrines that have kind of cropped up due to the idea that Adam and Eve were cursed. And,
Oh,
I'm one, I don't, of course we can talk about total depravity or not, but, people tend to go to the point that, that total depravity would mean that there's no thing at all that's good in us apart from Christ.
hmm
And there's nothing salvific apart from Christ. And even the good things that are in people are bearing out the image of God in general. So to me, it's very frustrating when we get to nothing at all being good. So,
well, and that leads me to the question I always ask: are we saying that one man's destructive act is greater than God's creative act?
right.
And I'm not going to glorify man that much to say that we ruined everything in one fell swoop. I mean, there was damage.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely damage and consequences. But yeah, like you said, for us to and what really is in the act itself quite quite small.
hmm
And to be able to say that we ruined the entire universe. No, we
we
took things off course. And death definitely entered the scene. But at the same time, we
got a God who's
We-
greater and is able to redeem, and we did not outsmart him or outpower him in any way.
right. So sorry, let's move on. That's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. We'll get there.
But I think most of us know the story. Rebecca does have the kids, and she has Jacob and Esau. Esau is born first, and Jacob is born grasping his heel. And so the name Jacob is an interesting name because it actually has a couple of different meanings. I think most of us are taught that, it's supplanter or grasper. In the folklore tradition, it is actually heel. And so that he would grab hold of the heel. And that's going to come in to be important later on in the story, because we need to be looking. When you have something that's kind of weird, that rule number 3 I have that I stole from Heiser, if it's weird, it's important. That is important that you would name your child Heel. I mean, that's just a weird name.
Yeah. Well, when we come back to that, we'll be sure to point it out.
And so, now, Esau, I want to look at him for a little bit, because I think sometimes when we study the Bible, what we wind up doing is we look at the heroes, we try to glorify them, and then we turn around and ignore the people we don't like.
Right.
And we've got this mindset that Esau was this horrible, horrible person.
Yeah.
And the thing is, Esau really isn't that bad. I mean, when he shows up in the story, he's been out hunting. Actually, let's just go to the scripture, because I want to make sure I get.
So yeah. When Jacob was cooking, Esau came in from the field. He was exhausted. Esau said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stew, for I'm exhausted." Therefore, his name was called Edom, which so I have a note here for that. Edom is red for Hebrew.
Mhm.
Hebrew for red, I guess. Jacob said, sell your birthright to me now. And Esau said, I'm about to die. What use is a birthright to me? And then Jacob says, swear to me now. So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and lentil stew. Hey, we had some of that the other day. And and he ate and drank and rose and went on his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright.
Okay, and this is totally separate from getting the blessing from Isaac.
Right.
But there's some key words in here, and these key words have caused people to kind of develop some folklore.
So this is where we're getting into the weird stuff.
This is where we're getting into the weird stuff, and we need to put a major caveat on that, because
We can just put the disclaimer on here. We are not endorsing what we're about to talk about. We just want to show you some weird stuff.
some weird stuff that, even though it's based on ancient folklore and a lot of medieval folklore, it still has impact today. there are like whole segments of the internet world that is dedicated to keeping this alive. And it has impacted our theology.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we don't use the word I'm getting ready to use, because in churches, it's still that mindset is there.
Right.
And so the word is vampire.
Yeah. Well, even before we get into the vampire stuff, I just want to point out, there's the descriptions between Jacob and Esau, and we're kind of starting to get there.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get like way off in the deep end of the vampire lore and all that stuff, is I actually remember in Sunday school going through these verses and being told by my Sunday school teachers that Jacob was an example of what a godly person is supposed to be, and Esau wasn't. And men who love Jesus don't spend their Sundays watching football, or go hunting,
Don't grow a beard.
don't grow beards. That was and actually that's kind of funny. I had a friend who was in seminary, and he came across an old like pastoral manual, like
Mhm.
just different expectations from their denomination. And it specifically said the pastor is representative of the church and should never be seen in public without being clean shaven.
Well,
And so yeah, that's actually something I've heard taught, is that you don't cause fights, you don't get violent, you don't get angry. I've heard that verse used to teach that, which I like I said, I want to throw that out there, that's kind of a misnomer.
Well, and
or
that's
misunderstanding, I guess.
that's why these ideas, they are still impacting. Matter of fact, when I went to seminary, which wasn't that long ago, the men were not allowed to have anything more than a mustache.
Which, yeah, I don't know why you settle on a mustache.
Right?
I mean,
No, most men.
it's a very specific type of face that can get away with
There are
only a mustache.
Two men in this whole world that can get away with only a mustache: Tom Selleck and Sam Elliott. And Tom's kind of questionable. So
Yeah, but those were some serious mustaches, and,
Yeah.
and they had a strong face to pull it off. And Sam Elliott has a voice that it doesn't matter,
he can do whatever.
he. So there's that.
Yeah, there's my celebrity crush for you right there. He just the voice, but yeah, this has impacted, and I think that a lot of times we get these teachings and we kind of have these loose biblical foundations, but we don't have really solid biblical foundations. And until somebody comes along and says, "Wait a minute, where did this really come from? Why are we interpreting the scripture this way?"
Right.
And that's why I love this story. And when I taught Old Testament, a lot of times this usually fell right around October. So it was just a great little, fun lecture to throw in with my students.
Yeah. Now, what's really fun is just so you know, the conversation that we were having today started was because we're going through Genesis, and when we got done, Emily was telling me that she said she didn't think we were going to have much to cover in Jacob and Esau because so many people cover Jacob and Esau. But then like everything else, whenever she says that, if she really starts getting into her research mode, we wind up being someplace for a long time. But that's okay. We've got time. There's no limit. So
Well, it is fun, and because where do you stop the studies? So I'm just going to give some of the reasons why this is why people might think that Esau was a vampire. The first one you actually kind of highlighted when you read, whenever Esau said, "Give me some of that red stuff."
yeah,
And
just give me some of the red soup.
it's the roots and the wording there in Hebrew. It actually is kind of built on the same stem as dam or blood.
Okay.
So give me some of that blood. And so now we've got this. Wait a minute, what's going on here? There's Esau's a hunter,
Mhm.
and in Judaism, hunting's not favorable.
Right. Yeah. They're what were we talking about this one day? Where the Jewish nation, the Hebrews were not known, were one of the few nations in the world that didn't come specifically from a long line of hunters.
Right. Really, the only other hunter that's mentioned in the Bible is Nimrod,
Right.
and he's not favorable at all.
Right, and especially not since Bugs Bunny. But I think we covered that already. So
We did. It's too early in our series to be recycling material. And so, but he was a hunter, and even Rabbi Eleazar said that, I'm sorry. Let me go back to the hunting point because my notes are a lot of fun to decipher sometimes. He would hunt people with his mouth, is what was said. This is one of the traditions that grew up. And so
where did that come from?
I was looking for that because how do you hunt with your mouth? I mean, obviously we have vampire stories, which would help us.
Large cats that do that, but small cats do that too, but I don't know how a person would. That's very strange.
Well, and the thing is, the Hebrew actually, whenever you look at it, it specifies that it's with a bow and arrow. And so it's not with necessarily your mouth, but that tradition has grown up and we don't know why. Rabbi Eleazar said that Esau was so mad that he wanted to suck out Jacob's blood. So I have never been so mad at a sibling. This is what I wanted to do.
No, sounds icky.
And that's based on, actually, that is based on scripture, because later, whenever Jacob's going to go off with Laban, he's going to spend some time there. And when he comes back, the scripture says that Esau falls on Jacob's neck and kisses him. And now this is how, when you read too much into scripture, you can really get led astray.
Right.
Because that word in Hebrew for kiss, there's 2 dots that are above it. And these 2 dots were said to be included to indicate that there were 2 dots indicating bite marks on Jacob's neck. And they really played up in the Talmud, and a lot of the Second Temple lit this anger that Jacob and Esau had for each other, even to the point that Rashi in the medieval years says that when Jacob is wrestling with the angel or wrestling with God, in Judaism, you can't have him wrestling with God. That's just a no-no.
Sure.
And wrestling with an angel is still kind of questionable.
But the Nephilim aren't.
Well, I know. Well, it depends. Which time period are we talking about? If we're talking before or after Jesus, yeah. And so this wrestling with the angel is, Rashi believes that this was Esau's guardian angel who was trying to prohibit Jacob from coming back in.
Oh man, and there's a whole tangent we could go on about the guardian angel thing. Do you have anything on that?
No,
I don't. We'll have to.
I stuck with this.
Let's hit that up. Actually, I think Heiser covers that, so we may just link to his episode where he covers that with Peter.
Yeah. You've been reading the new Heiser Angel book.
Yeah, I just started it not too long ago. About, what is it? I think I'm about 20 pages in. It's really good. It starts out with a lot of heavy linguistic work.
It's Heiser, of course.
Yeah, so it's going to start out with that, but it's not so deep into it that it's unreadable to someone who doesn't read Greek or Hebrew. It's actually it's pretty entertaining so far.
You might need to check my bag before I leave. So, but okay, carrying on. So, but the reason why Rashi says that this is Esau's angel is that he had to disappear. Remember, God or the angel, however you want to phrase it, says you got to release me by daylight. So, what has to be released before daylight?
A vampire.
A vampire.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and
it keeps getting better.
Oh yeah. Well, and then there's the confusion, because if you read through that account, which we will do, but I wanted to put all this together. There's some confusion in the language. Is Jacob wrestling with a man? Is he wrestling with God? Is he wrestling with an angel?
Right.
So if he's dealing with a vampire, that covers all the ground, because now you're talking about mortal and immortal in the same being, right? Okay. Yeah. Vampires are hairy. Now, I know Twilight did not teach us this.
Yeah, vampires used to not be quite so pretty. They didn't sparkle in the sunlight.
And they specifically had hairy palms. And so what did Jacob do to fool Isaac?
Covered his hands with goat. Yeah, okay. So, oh man.
So you can see how we're starting to get these little... Nathan's brain is hurting. I can see it.
I mean, I can see some of how they get there, but it's like, why would you come to that conclusion in earnest? I mean, did somebody hear this as like I just want to know if was somebody making stuff up around a campfire to bug the children one day, and someone just kept it in the back of their brain and began teaching it when they were an adult. It just doesn't make sense to me that someone would go quite this far with it.
We've got to emphasize the fundamental differences between Jacob and Esau. Why would God love Jacob and hate Esau? And this is the question that it all boils down to. And we can't just have it that Esau was, just a guy hanging out having a good time, so God hated him.
Well, and then again, we got to get into the definition of hate. Okay, so
just go.
Oh man, I don't want to cover this because there's just so much there. But again, like you said, we have to try to rationalize it. Mm-hmm. If we can't make sense of it, then to us we struggle with that. But yeah, like you said, it's just God's decision. So and we actually had in the paddle store, Joe asked about Romans 9, where he was, and I forgot to look that up. I should have done that earlier. But it talks about Romans 9 and the potter and the clay, and Jacob have I loved, and Esau have I hated, all that stuff, and he put a link to a girl talking about it who had left, who had left a fundamentalist Christian group because of their views on that. And basically, there's a way that you can interpret that really paints God as an evil person. And if you're looking at it in terms of salvation and God actually hating someone before they're born, that's different. But we have examples. We have Jesus saying, unless you hate your mother and father and brother and even your own life, you can't. You can't be part of my kingdom?
Yeah.
Or is it can't be my disciple? I can't remember which one it was. But we have that example of Jesus using this rabbinic understanding of if you hate something more, if you love something intensely more than anything else, then everything else comparatively could be considered as hate, not an active hate. It's just a linguistic. It's an idiom that they would use to illustrate how much somebody loves something.
Right.
And so when we look at the potter and the clay analogy, there's actually, Second Temple literature. That's the other thing that Joe asked about, and this kind of applies. But when we look at the potter and the clay analogy used in Romans, when Paul's writing there, he's using this understanding of the verse he cites from, is it Jeremiah?
Yeah, it's in Jeremiah.
Where, can you look that up real quick? With talking about Israel being clay in the hands of the potter, and that, the clay can't say back to the potter, why have you made me so? Well, the problem is when we start reading everything, and I'm going to be getting way off here in a tangent. When we read every single thing in the lens of this sends you to hell, this saves you from hell, as opposed to this advances the kingdom, or this helps me love God better, or those types of framework, then we start seeing everything in the framework of God choosing hell or not hell for people. Mm-hmm. So when we look at the potter and the clay analogy, second, Miriam Brand, we'll link to this in the show notes. She has an episode where she talks about the writings of Ben Sira, where he references that verse in Jeremiah, and he's talking about the potter and the clay. The clay can't say back to the potter, why have you made me so? And what Ben Sira is talking about, what Jeremiah would have been talking about, what Second Temple Jews, including Paul, would have understood this to mean, was holiness. And there's the other problem. When we conflate righteousness or being redeemed with being holy, we put those two ideas so close together in our minds and in the West that we can't separate them. Holiness is set apart for God's purposes. Mm-hmm. And so we're not talking necessarily about salvation or condemnation when we talk about the potter and the clay and Jacob and Esau, because again, we've villainized Esau to the point where he's evil. But in the verse that Jacob have I loved, Esau have I hated, we're talking about Esau as the father of the Edomites
Right.
and what they did to Israel later on, and talking about them as a nation. That Esau have I loved, or Jacob have I loved, Esau have I hated. That's not in Genesis. God doesn't say that.
Never. No place.
And so that's the thing. God's talking about what Edom did. But then also, if you talk about one having a place over the other, God's saying, I chose Jacob to bring forth my kingdom. He's not talking about the salvation or not of Esau anywhere in this. And later on, you even see Esau and Jacob embrace each other. They get together.
Right. And
Esau does the right thing. Later on, you're talking about how Esau leaves whenever Jacob comes back to take his birthright. He honors his words. And so, it's not a matter of, we've got to get over this evangelistic, and I say evangelistic as in like the big tent revival evangelism type of mentality with the traveling preacher. And don't get me wrong, people I know have entered the kingdom through an altar call. But we've overplayed, I think, the idea of salvation or not salvation in everything we look at, and we've taken all the nuance out of Scripture, and we've taken holiness and righteousness, and we've made them identical.
right.
And so you can be righteous and not be holy. You can be and I love Miriam Brand talks about we have holidays. In the Jewish calendar, there's holidays. There's Yom Kippur, and then there's Thursday.
Passover, yeah.
You can be a perfectly fine, sunny, beautiful Thursday, and you're not Yom Kippur, and it doesn't matter why or what you do. That day is not going to be that day on the calendar.
But it's still
But
useful,
it's still a good day,
and it's still necessary, and it shouldn't be neglected. And so, and I think that's what people, whenever we hear that verse, and we fail to understand so often when we look in the Bible, when God talks about Jacob, he is talking about the nation of Israel.
right?
It has very little to do with Jacob as a person. And so the same applies across the board with Esau. And I love Leighton Flowers. One of the things that he says, there's a difference between a call to service and being called for salvation.
Right.
And so Jacob was called to service. And we're going to talk some about why he is called to service. Because there is a difference. But the problem is the difference has been made too big.
Right.
It's been, it was used kind of to reinforce that the children of Jacob were holy, that they were elect. And Heiser even points out in some of his stuff that the whole nation of Israel was not saved, even though the whole nation of Israel was elect.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a good distinction to make. And that's actually, and to go back to Paul just real quick, I just kind of wrap this up. Sorry. So when Paul's addressing this idea that the lump of clay is complaining, it's because Israel has abandoned looking rightly to Christ as the Messiah. And so God's saying, okay, you're not going to become a holy vessel like I was molding you to become, but I'm going to take a little remnant, a little piece of this clay, and I'm going to make the holy vessel that's going to carry forth my word, my church. So that's what we're looking at there. Again, not looking at salvation. I mean, because I love, people of course want to get into Cyrus,
right?
And he's a foreign king, and God's saying, I'm going to use Cyrus to deliver my people.
Calls him the Messiah.
Yeah. But he never says there's nothing there to indicate whether or not he's saved from hell, whether he becomes a practicing Jew, whether or not he's a righteous person. He just says, I'm going to use him. And so we've got to separate those things in our mind. And like you said, the election versus salvation. We can be elected to hear the word of God. We can be elected for a specific purpose. And even it's in Every Man's Talmud. I need to look that up too. The rabbis have a saying, all knowledge of all things is in heaven. I can't remember. Knowledge of all things is in heaven, except whether or not a man will fear heaven. And it's very, I need to look up which rabbi that was, but it's saying that before we're born, God does choose certain things. Like he chooses some people to be rich, some to be poor, but he does not choose whether or not we will be righteous. And so that's very interesting to me. That's a very ancient Jewish mindset. Now again, we're not the ones saving. Jesus is the only one who saves. But he gets to decide whether or not we're saved, and it's not based on our actions. It's about whether or not we're devoted to him. And so and we can even go deeper into that if we want to, about whether or not
made a whole lot of people mad.
I know. It's like, I love this discussion, and I know we basically have just alienated a large
group of people. But and that's the thing. We've studied this backwards and forward.
But I'd rather have friends that are right. I'm sorry.
You aren't supposed to say things like, yeah, but
we can disagree on that, and we can have the conversation. We still love them. And again, that's okay. So we're back to, do we actually need the whole Bible for salvation? And I would say no. We don't actually. If you have the gospel and you believe in Christ, one of the gospels, you believe in Christ, and you never get your hands on the rest of the Bible to know any better, I think God's going to honor that.
Then we're into the C.S. Lewis discussion.
Goodness. Yeah. So, and that can go even farther and farther. We're not going to have the rest of this conversation on the air, because I think you have more notes. Sorry,
I do.
I kind of took off there.
Yeah, I actually do. But no, it's a good. It ties in, because by emphasizing how evil Esau was, then this did set Jacob up to be more of a hero of faith and less of the scoundrel that he truly was.
Right.
And I mean, he was. I'm sorry. But this also comes back into going back to the vampire stuff. In Genesis 36:12, Esau has a grandson named Amalek.
Mm-hmm.
And now we know in Exodus 17:8 that the Amalekites are the first people that attack Israel after the Exodus. So here we have Esau attacking Jacob.
Mm-hmm.
Now in Numbers 24, Balaam prophesies that there's always going to be animosity between Esau and Jacob. But again, he's talking about the nations. 1 Samuel 15, Saul fights the Amalekites, and this is when he spares King Agag. And
well, I mean, yeah, because if you take that to mean literally Jacob and Esau, you'd either have to one to say, if the prophecy is literally true, either one, they're still alive, or two, there's some kind of cosmic battle that's going on after we die.
Right. Well, and Exodus 17, even if it's the first mention after this, in Exodus 17, they're now 400 years old and they're still duking it out.
Sure.
So now the thing is, the Amalekites are actually part of the Rephaim and the giants that were brought up from Genesis 6. So now we know that Enoch discusses that the Rephaim and the Nephilim were cannibals. So this also plays into that.
Right.
And Amalek is supposedly meant to mean to lick. Now the problems with this theory, yeah.
That's such an odd name.
Well, but if you're going to lick up the blood, and that's where it comes from, the problem with this theory, Esau was not the father of the Amalekites. Whenever we have the name of two people that are the same in the Bible, it doesn't automatically mean we're talking about the same person.
Right.
I think every one of us knows more than one person named John.
Fair.
I mean, your kids went to go someplace and evidently there's another Emily running around there. So
right.
I'm not her. Although I hear she has musical talent, so yeah, good for her. But anyway, the problems with this theory is in Genesis 14, when Abraham has the battle of the four kings, we have the Amalekites there. So he can't both fight the Amalekites and be the great-great-grandfather of the father of the Amalekites.
So that would make sense.
Yeah. So Esau in the scripture, another problem with this, he's never presented as a bad guy. Just some great things that he does. He feeds his father his favorite food.
Yeah, and not only does he feed his father the favorite food, he goes out and he hunts for it, he works for it, and so
he's not warming up ramen.
Yeah, when he goes out on these hunting trips, they take a long time, and even you see Isaac being surprised whenever Jacob comes in. He's like, "Why you're here?" Well, that didn't take long.
Exactly.
And then Jacob's, of course, well, God found favor with me. he was likely going out probably at least overnight, if not longer, typically. And also, you see where Esau comes in from the field and he's exhausted.
Mhm.
He's not, and that's one of those things I think we kind of underplay that because, he says, I'm about to die. Now we often say,
I'm
I'm
starving.
starving. And who was it? Trevor Noah, actually. I watched his comedy special on Netflix recently.
I haven't seen this one.
It was actually pretty good. But he's from Africa, and he was talking about just the difference in languages, and he said that when he got he was talking to his roommate one day, and his roommate was like, "Man, I'm starving." And he's like, "Oh, really? Well, we better hurry." Like, what, because in the country he's from, if you say you're starving,
You mean it.
that's a big deal. And especially in the culture they're in. And so not only do you have Jacob just kind of being coy with his brother who hasn't eaten since breakfast, you have Esau coming in going, "I've been out hunting. I haven't caught anything for long enough that I'm about to starve."
Mm-hmm.
And so you have Jacob basically
Taking advantage
of someone who's suffering.
Well, because in my mind, I go to those times that, we grew up on a farm and getting up at, the crack of dawn to go haul hay and spending all day out there. And, I started when I was 8 years old, so the bales were bigger than me. And,
Right.
And you would come in and it's like the moment you just hit that house, it's like all the exhaustion, all the hunger, it just hits.
Right.
And so this is real physical labor. And so he's doing this on behalf of his father to make his father happy. And this is going to actually play into some stuff here in a little bit, another part of the story, because this all overlaps. So he's happy. When Jacob returns, he's happy to see his brother.
Mm-hmm.
He's not, Jacob's scared, but Esau isn't. He offers to guard Jacob's family as they travel back into the land.
Mm-hmm.
He leaves Canaan. You brought this up. When Jacob comes back in, he's like, yeah, and he moves on. And the other thing he does, when he realizes that his parents aren't real thrilled about the wives that he's chosen, he goes and gets one of Ishmael's daughters and marries her.
Huh.
And yeah, because he realizes, oh, they want us to marry within the family, which again, this goes back to Isaac and Ishmael's relationship and how we've characterized that.
Right.
But so I think we need to be very careful when we're looking at the Bible not to overplay our hand. And this is what happens whenever we read too much into the text. And this is definitely, it's caused some problems with theology, but even more than that, this has led into some major racism and bigotry.
Right.
I read some stuff while I was researching this that even though I'm sitting on my side of the computer, I can feel the guy on the other side typing it, foaming at the mouth.
Right.
And I'm not even going to put a link to this because it was just so ridiculous, and his stuff just should not be propagated.
If you're really interested, message Emily. She might send it to you if you just want to see what it is. But we're not going to give him free advertising.
Nope. Because he said that basically anyone who's claiming to be Jewish today is not a descendant of Jacob. They're actually a descendant of Esau, and that they were the ones who were responsible for the Bolshevik Revolution, which, that's Anastasia and Rasputin and all of those people, and the major bloodshed and violence that went down with that. They said they're responsible for the ills of Germany, and that Hitler was doing the right thing in order to stop them from taking power.
Now, we do not endorse that. Let's
no.
I know we put the disclaimer up front, but that is something that that's just ridiculous. There's no place for that in biblical theology. It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
and there's no place for it anywhere else. There shouldn't be a place for it anywhere else. Sorry, go ahead.
No, but that thinking has by reading so much into the text, now this person is able to say, "Hey, I'm a good Christian. I'm a good Bible believer, and look at me, how righteous and holy I am. That I'm still fighting the battle that was started back in the beginning of Genesis."
Right.
And so, yeah.
Yeah. So you can really get out there and make some interesting, at least, cases for things, but But at the end of the day, you've got to look at, is this even close to the heart of what God would want? And if you are actually paying attention to the right parts of the Bible, then you would just completely deny this type of teaching.
Yeah, and this is, and the thing is, even if that guy was even halfway right, one of the things we also need to remember is that God told Israel, "Do not fight Edom."
Right.
In Deuteronomy, he says, "Don't do it." He said, "They're your brother, they're your kinsman. You need to respect that bond." And it wasn't until Edom had attacked them and had continued to indulge in these idolatrous practices that God okayed and commanded for Saul to go ahead and begin to the conquest to remove them. And David did defeat them later. And after that, after David's reign, then it becomes a back and forth battle. And this is where, we start having all of this king of the north and this king of the south and, the co-regents and everything. And that's where it gets kind of crazy. But because Edom became such a huge target, actually Edom became a byword for Rome in the Talmud. And this has also led to this idea that Esau and his descendants were beyond redemption.
Right.
And I think we need to be very careful. And one of the reasons why I went there, that vampire ideology, it seems so ridiculous. But is it ridiculous for us to claim that Esau was a horrible person? To claim that Esau is totally dissolute and there's nothing to save him, when God seems to be saying the exact opposite? That in the Talmud, or not the Talmud, in the Torah, we still have these indications that Esau, there is something good about him.
Right.
And he's not beyond redemption. And I think that's one of the things that we need to remember. Esau's us, guys, in so many ways. I mean, he's in the moment.
Right.
And that really is the dividing line between Jacob and Esau. Esau is in the moment. I'm starving. I want this now. Jacob is willing to sacrifice and wait and work for a future because Jacob's whole story revolves around vision. Esau doesn't have the vision. Jacob does.
Right.
And that's the difference between the two. And that's why Jacob could be the one to father this nation.
Yeah. And then I do think it's kind of interesting. You talk about the vision and seeing what's right in front of you. It's kind of you could almost say this kind of archetypal story of kind of transitioning away from, humanity kind of transitioning away from a hunter-gatherer type of population into agrarian and being able to look at this position of the stars and go, oh, well, we see this constellation.
It's time to plant.
It's time to plant. We see this when it's time to sow, or it's time to reap, or just different things like that. But that foresight and that transition into being able to become a people that could, because you had the nomadic people, then you had, the hunter, then you had, and then you have, to move to an agrarian where you're actually raising livestock and crops.
Yeah,
think of the word crops, but you that takes planning. So go ahead.
And that's what Jacob does. He is very much a planner, and we're going to see that. And I think that one of the things that Jacob really, you see in his story, is not only is he a planner, that planning side of him is kind of the other side of the coin of him being a schemer and him being a trickster. And so he really does show what happens when you take a gift out of balance.
Right.
And so I think that's going to be a fun thing to discuss.
Yeah. Well, let's yeah. That's cool. Do we have anything else on that?
I think when we start moving forward, we're going to start getting a little deeper. What's our time?
Doesn't matter. Don't ask me that. I'll let you know if we're coming up on time.
Okay.
So,
sure.
But no, I do like what you did mention was gifts out of balance, because there is actually one of the small groups I went with at church. We did like a marriage thing. We're just talking about, I don't know, it's not really counseling, but just marriage help course thing. And one of the things they did talk about was, whenever we see somebody doing something that annoys us, a lot of times it's just they're using the weak side of their gift.
Oh, I like that weak side.
And that you can have someone who is a good planner, but sometimes they get a little neurotic, or you can have someone who is a terrible, who is a little more go with the flow, but then they don't plan, and so they're always late and messing things up, or there's a strength to that, to the various sides of it, and that's a poor example. I was trying to think of some other ones, but
I have a quote written down, and I wish I could remember who said it. It says, "In every excess there is sin, and every sin there is excess." And I love that quote because it's back to that thing in Ecclesiastes that we both love about all things being in balance.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that we miss a lot in Christian circles is the idea of balance. And
yeah, because everyone wants everyone to be extreme, and yeah, in Ecclesiastes it said the man who fears God avoids extremes, and
Mhm.
but yeah, there's so I like that, but there's it's kind of that whole deal of you have a strong side of things and a weak side of things, where if you're not exercising your gift correctly, then it becomes something that's a weakness.
Oh yeah. And you want to, yeah. I
So,
have a great example, but we won't go there.
but yeah, and of course, again, we're getting into psychologizing the text, but which I know.
And and that's a good point actually, because that's a fun thing to do, but we need to be very careful when we do it because we can be reading too much in, and that's the whole reason why we went over Esau being a vampire is that reading too much into the text. And we're going to talk some more as we move forward about what happens when we fill in things in the text that aren't there. And sometimes it can be illuminating because it provides some context and some character, kind of it gives you some depth. It
Yeah.
allows you to engage that imagination. But then sometimes if we take it too far, then we wind up coming up with these really weird ideas.
Mhm.
And, let's face it, Esau being a vampire is a weird idea.
Yeah.
But you can, I think one of the reasons why I bring this up a lot of times is to show students just because someone can quote unquote prove something from the Bible doesn't mean it's true.
Right.
And
Right.
and I saw your face as I'm pulling out all these things, and you who know better, and I know you know better,
Right.
you're like, I see it, and I know you weren't accepting it, but you were definitely
Yeah.
seeing it.
Well, and that's part of what we do is we look at the right way to do things. We look at the wrong way to do things. We pick both of them apart, and we figure out if it's anything that's going to stand up to actual scrutiny. So, but yeah, but I that's probably a good place to end this week, and then we'll kind of. Well, I mean, we're recording the same day, but they'll give me a chance to look over some show notes and stuff for next week because I don't remember what we're doing yet. It's still early in my mind, so
It is.
With that, I want to say thank you to everyone for tuning in. We've been having a great time doing this, and we hope you're enjoying listening as well. If you do like what you heard or saw, hit us up with the subscribe button. Give us a rating on iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play or wherever you get your podcast.
Mhm.
We are on all of those. We're also on some other podcatchers that I didn't even submit to, but I've got a friend who uses some. So wherever you find podcast, give us a review.
Share.
That's the biggest thing. If you do feel inclined, hit us up on Patreon, Raven Creek SC.
And you're
Then-
going to find us and commentarians there.
Yeah, you can find patreon.com/thecommentarians
Mhm.
if you want to support that show. Then there is Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Raven Creek SC or ravencreeksc.com will get you to pretty much every place you can find us. And we will be glad to have you be part of the conversation. And until next time, have a great week, and we'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Faith and Other Oddities podcast, a Raven Creek Social Club production. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you like what you've heard, please write us a review on iTunes or consider supporting us on patreon.com/RavenCreekSC. As always, thank you for listening and don't forget to join us next week.